See, Pitt, gone. Texas.
Bracketology
gone.
here, folks.
Mike, how's your bracket doing?
Oh, it's a disaster. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
You had Pitt in the
gone.
Final Four. I had him and tried to take him out. I'm doing a computer run through Rodney Hess's NCAA pool. I won it last year, 2 out of the last 5 years. A little plug for me. Shout out for Rodney.
There you go.
But I wanted to move Florida in there because I just all of a sudden I started thinking Pitt doesn't come through. And again, you were down there at in that region. You saw them live. What a crazy thing with Pitt. First of all, before we talk about the brackets, what's up with these guys? They find ways to lose.
It's a strange thing, and they did find ways to lose. But you know, if you take that game in isolation, forget Pitt's history for a minute, and take that game in isolation, that was a phenomenal basketball game. There was some really controversial stuff. 2 fouls called in the last 1.4 seconds of the game.
I've never seen that.
And I don't have any problem with that with the officials. I'm not going to rip the officials in that situation, but. You know, I don't know what it is with Pitt, except that I think we've all gotten carried away with the Big East, and I still think it's probably the best league in America. I think it's the only league in America where a team from the bottom third of the league could be in the Final 16 in America, which is Marquette was the 11th best team in the Big East. I don't think any other league could do that. I still think it's the best league in America, but there's no question that it was overhyped. Overrated. It's to some extent an ESPN creation, a TV creation, a big media market creation, but it's not it's certainly not a dominant league. And we said before that it would not be. Right. I don't think we predicted 9 teams out after the second round, but it's not a dominant league by any stretch of the imagination.
In a small defense of the league, 2 of them had to play each other in the second round. And that knocked one of them out.
But if you're going to take the Charles Barkley position, you would say, well, if they wouldn't have played another team from the Big East, they might have lost. You know what I mean?
You could do that too. It does show the depth because Marquette was one of the ones that was further down,
yes,
and they
really
looked impressive in their 2 games.
It really does. Yeah.
In UConn, after playing 5 in a row, I thought they're going to be tired. They're looking really good. And that Walker guy, can anybody defend this guy?
He's a tremendous player and unbelievably clever off the dribble. I don't know if it's blinding quickness so much as he's just really skilled. He can get his own shot off the dribble. Really impressive.
I got to make one comment about the referees overall, but the Carolina-Washington game, some of those calls down the stretch were crazy. And I think it was a goaltend they should have called Henson, although it was a 2-point. But it helped me because Arizona beat Texas. But the referee on the side with the 5 seconds, if you watch, he's going, and then he goes like this. He goes faster. I'm like, dude, did you want to make a call there? We should know your name.
Plus, he didn't do it 5 times. He didn't do 5 complete things.
Supposedly the rule is that you have to make the timeout by 4, but you're right, he didn't do 5. And I've played basketball long enough, I've coached some games now, and I'm doing this sometimes, but my hand, when I do this to make sure the ref sees it, I'm trying to stay the same. At 3 and 4, he picked up the pace. Okay, that's all I got to say about that.
Weird.
We talk about all the upsets. I think there was as many upsets last year. You look, Cornell was the 12th seed last year.
Sure.
St. Mary's the 10th. They made it to the Thursday games the second weekend of the season.
You're right, and people I think enjoy saying this. So they say it every year, you know. It's like saying there's no dominant team in college basketball. There's almost never going to be a dominant team. In the last 20 years, there's been 2 dominant teams. I would say the North Carolina team a few years ago with Hansborough and I think that was a dominant team. And I think Kentucky, the Pitino Kentucky team in 1996. I think that's the 2 dominant teams in the last 20 years.
20 years, wow.
You could maybe argue Florida because they won it 2 years in a row, but
yeah, that's about it.
But my point is, the norm is for there to be no dominant team. That's how this is.
If you look at what the top 8 teams would be right now in the nation, Carolina, Duke, Syracuse, you know, you go through these, UConn. The only one that really got knocked out, I would say Pitt, so I'd say 2. Pitt and Syracuse are probably the only 2 of the top 8 teams right now, top 10 teams, that are knocked out of this tournament. The rest of them aren't. Texas is borderline, okay?
Here's another interesting thing. If you look at, if people rank the top, let's say, 6 teams that are still playing, I think most people would say Kansas, Ohio State, maybe North Carolina, Duke, maybe San Diego State,
BYU.
I don't know. But anyway, my point is this. Everybody always says guards. It's about guards this time of year. Most of those teams are not guard-oriented. Most of those teams, their best players are front-line players. Think about Kansas. Think about Ohio State. Think about North Carolina. Duke is pretty guard-oriented, but in general, I think it's amazing how the big guys make a big difference.
And I say about time. We haven't had the big guys dominating this thing in 30 years. Not
I think it is about time.
Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing. You know, we have. And I love watching the big guys. And you watch even Derek Williams with Arizona, who didn't have a great game against Texas, but down the stretch he shined. You watch Ohio State. You watch what Carolina's doing. There are some. It's fun to watch these guys and watch what they do with the inside-out game where they set up the guards.
That's a very good point, and that reminds me of Pitt, because watching Pitt up close this week, they had one big guy, and he is not a guy who could come out and set a high screen and then pop and shoot a jumper, or come out and shoot a high screen and then dive down and post, or they completely lack that. And I think about it, that was their flaw. That was what was limited for Pitt. So I guess we're on the big guy bandwagon.